Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge and the Teachings of Plants. Written by Robin Wall Kimmerer, read by Naomi Kirst-Schultz. Chapter 20, Part 1. Sitting in a Circle. Brad arrives at our wilderness field station for ethnobotany class in loafers and a polo shirt. I watch him wander the shoreline, looking in vain for a cell phone signal, looking like he really needs to talk to somebody. Nature's great and all, he says, as I show him around, but the remoteness makes him uneasy. There's nothing here but trees. Most of our students come to the Cranberry Lake Biological Station with effervescent enthusiasm, but there are always a few who arrive with only resignation to endure 5 weeks away from the wired world, a graduation requirement. Over the years, the demeanor of the students has become a pretty good mirror for the changing relationships to nature. They used to arrive motivated by childhoods filled with camping or fishing or messing about in the woods. Today, while their passion for wilderness has not diminished, they now report that their inspiration comes from Animal Planet or the National Geographic Channel. More and more often, the reality of nature outside the living room takes them by surprise. I try to reassure Brad that the woods are just about the safest place in the world. I confess that I experience the same unease when I go to the city, a slight panic of not knowing how to take care of myself where there's nothing but people. But I know it is a tough transition. We are 7 miles across the lake with no road access, not a scrap of pavement, and completely surrounded by wilderness for a day's walk in any direction. It's easily an hour to medical help and 3 to a Walmart. I mean, what if you need something, he says. I guess he's going to find out. After just a few days of being here, the students start to metamorphose into field biologists. Their confidence with the equipment and the insider jargon gives them a new swagger. They constantly practice learning Latin names and count coup by using them. At the evening volleyball games, it's perfectly excusable in biostation culture to miss the ball if your opponent calls out, "Megacereal Alcyon!" when a kingfisher rattles across the shore. These are good things to know, to begin to discriminate the living world into individuals, to discern the threads in the weave of the woods, to attune the body to the land. But I also see that when we put scientific instruments in their hands, they trust their own senses less. And when they put more energy into memorizing Latin names, they spend less time looking at the beings themselves. The students come already knowing a lot about ecosystems and can identify an impressive list of plants. But when I ask how those plants take care of them, they cannot say. So, at the start of my ethnobotany class, we brainstorm a list of human needs with the goal of discovering which of them the Adirondack plants might be able to meet. It's a familiar list: food, shelter, heat, clothing. I'm glad that oxygen and water make it into the top 10. Some of the students have studied Maslow's hierarchy of human needs and take it beyond survival into the higher levels of art, companionship, and spirituality. This, of course, elicits some dubious comedy about people whose needs for interpersonal connection are met by carrots. Putting that observation aside, we begin with shelter, by building our classroom. They've chosen the site, marked the geometry on the ground, harvested saplings, and set them deep in the soil, so we have a 12-foot circle of neatly spaced maple poles. It's hot and sweaty work, at first done mostly as individuals, but when the circle is complete and the first pair of saplings are joined in an arch, the need for a team becomes clear. The tallest to grab the treetops, the heaviest to hold them down, the smallest to scramble up and lash them in place. The creation of one arch calls for the next, and they are led by the emerging shape of the wigwam. Its inherent symmetry makes any mistakes obvious, and the students tie and untie until they get it right. The woods are full of their bright voices. When the last pair of saplings is tied, quiet falls as they see what they have made. It looks like an upside-down bird's nest, a basket of thick saplings domed like a turtle's back. You want to be inside. All 15 of us can find a comfortable seat around the perimeter. Even without a covering, it feels cozy. Few of us live in round houses anymore, where there are no walls or corners. Indigenous architecture tends to the small and round, though, following the model of nests and dens and burrows and redds and eggs and wombs, as if there were some universal pattern for home. With our backs leaning against the saplings, we consider this convergence of design. A sphere has the highest ratio of volume to surface area, minimizing the materials needed for living space. Its form sheds water and distributes the weight of a snow load. It is efficient to heat and resistant to wind. Beyond material considerations, there is cultural meaning to living within the teachings of a circle. I tell them that the doorway always faces east, and they quickly assess its utility, given the prevailing westerly winds. The utility of greeting the dawn is not yet part of their thinking, but the sun will show them. This bare frame of a wigwam is not done teaching. It needs walls of cattail mats and a birch bark roof tied with spruce root. There is still work to be done. I see Brad before class, and he's still looking glum. I try to cheer him up and tell him, "We're going shopping across the lake today." There is a tiny shop in the town across the lake, the Emporium Marine, the kind of general store you find off the beaten track, that always seems to have the very thing you need, next to the shoelaces, cat food, coffee filters, a can of Hungry Man stew, and a bottle of Pepto-Bismol. But that's not where we're going. The cattail marsh has something in common with the Emporium, but I suppose a comparison to Walmart is more appropriate, as they both sprawl over acres of land. Today, we will shop at the marsh. At one time, marshes had a bad reputation for slimy beasts, disease, stink, and all manner of unpleasantness, until people realized how valuable they are. Our students now sing the praises of wetland biodiversity and their ecosystem functions, but that still doesn't mean they want to walk in them, and they eye me skeptically when I explain that gathering cattails is most efficiently accomplished in the water. I reassure them that there are no poisonous water snakes this far north, no quicksand, and that the snapping turtles generally hunker down when they hear us coming. I do not say the word leeches aloud. Eventually, they all follow me and manage to exit their canoes without capsizing. We wade like herons through the marsh, minus the grace and poise, the students tentative among the floating islets of shrubs and grasses, feeling for solidity before committing their weight to the next step. If their young lives had not already shown them, they will learn today that solidity is an illusion. The lake bottom here lies under several feet of suspended muck, as solid as chocolate pudding. Chris is the most fearless, and, bless him, he leads the way. Grinning like a 5-year-old, he stands nonchalantly in the channel, waist deep, elbow resting against a sedge hummock, as if it were an armchair. He's never done this before, but encourages the others anyway, offering advice to those teetering on a log. Just get it over with so you can relax and have fun. Natalie takes the plunge as she shouts, "Become one with your inner muskrat!" Claudia steps back to avoid the muddy splash. She's scared. Like an elegant doorman, Chris gallantly offers her a hand into the muck. Then, a long trail of bubbles rises up behind him and breaks the surface in a loud burble. He blushes under his mud-streaked face and shifts his feet as everyone eyes him. Another long trill of foul-smelling bubbles erupts behind him. The class cracks up and soon everybody is smooshing through the water. Swamp walking releases a stream of fart jokes as inevitably as methane, quote-unquote, swamp gas is released by our footsteps. The water is about thigh deep in most places, but every now and then there is a shriek and then laughter when someone discovers the chest-deep holes. I hope it's not Brad. To pull cattails, you reach underwater to the base of the plant and tug. If the sediments are loose enough, or if you're strong enough, you can pull up the whole plant, rhizome and all. The problem is that you can't tell whether the shoot will snap or not until you tug with all your might and suddenly it breaks free, leaving you sitting in the water with muck dripping from your ears. The rhizomes, essentially underground stems, are a real prize. Brown and fibrous on the outside, they are white and starchy on the inside, almost like a potato, and they taste pretty good roasted in the fire. Soak cut rhizomes in clean water and you'll soon have a bowl of pasty white starch that can become flour or porridge. Some of the hairy rhizomes have a stiff white shoot emerging from their end, a more than vaguely phallic organ of horizontal propagation. This is the growing point that will spread the cattails through the marsh. Invoking the hierarchy of human needs, some of the guys have a little fun with them when they think I'm not looking. The cattail plant, Typha latifolia, is like a giant grass, no distinct stem, but rather a rolled bundle of leaves that sheathe around each other in concentric layers. No one leaf could withstand wind and wave action, but the collective is strong and the extensive underwater network of rhizomes anchors them in place. Harvested in June, they are 3 feet high. Wait until August and you have leaves 8 feet long, each about an inch wide and strengthened by the parallel veins running from base to softly waving leaf tip. These circular veins are themselves encircled by sturdy fibers, all working to support the plant. In turn, the plant supports the people. Cattail leaves, split and twisted, are one of the easiest sources of plant cordage, are string and twine. Back at camp, we'll make twine for the wigwam and thread fine enough for weaving. Before long, the canoes are brimming with bundles of leaves and look like a flotilla of rafts on a tropical river. We tow them to shore, where we begin to sort and clean them by taking each plant apart, leaf by leaf from the outside in. As she strips off the leaves, Natalie drops hers quickly to the ground. "Ugh, it's all slimy," she says and starts to wipe her hands on her muddy pants, as if that will help. When you pull the leaf bases apart, gobs of cattail gel stretch like clear, watery mucus between the leaves. At first, it seems gross, but then you notice how good your hands feel. I've often heard herbalists say that the cure grows near to the cause, and accordingly, though gathering cattails is guaranteed to get you sunburned and itchy, the antidote to discomfort is in the plants themselves. Clear and cool and clean, the gel is refreshing and antimicrobial, the swamp's answer to aloe vera gel. The cattails make the gel as a defense against microbes and to keep the leaf bases moist when water levels drop. These same properties that protect the plant protect us too. It feels so soothing on sunburn that soon the students are smearing themselves with the slime. Cattails have evolved other features that are perfectly adapted for a life spent standing in the marsh. The bases of the leaves are underwater, but they still need oxygen for respiration. So like scuba divers with air tanks, they equip themselves with spongy, air-filled tissue, nature's bubble wrap. These white cells, called erenchyma, are big enough to be seen with the naked eye and make a buoyant, cushiony layer at the base of each leaf. The leaves are also coated with a waxy layer, a waterproof barrier like a raincoat. But this raincoat works in reverse, keeping water-soluble nutrients inside so they don't leach away into the water. This is all good for the plant, of course, and it's good for people. The cattails have made a superb material for shelter in leaves that are long, water-repellent, and packed with closed-cell foam for insulation. In the old times, fine mats of cattail leaves were sewn or twined to sheathe a summer wigwam. In dry weather, the leaves shrink apart from one another and let the breeze waft between them for ventilation. When the rains come, they swell and close the gap, making the mat waterproof. Cattails also make fine sleeping mats. The wax keeps away moisture from the ground, and the erenchyma provide cushioning and insulation. A couple of cattail mats, soft, dry, and smelling like fresh hay under your sleeping bag, makes for a cozy night. Squeezing the soft leaves between her fingers, Natalie says, "It's almost as if the plants made these things for us." The parallels between the adaptations evolved by the plants and the needs of the people are indeed striking. In some native languages, the term for plants translates to those who take care of us. Through natural selection, the cattails developed sophisticated adaptations that increase their survival in the marsh. The people were attentive students and borrowed solutions from the plants, which increased their likelihood of survival. The plants adapt, the people adopt. As we keep peeling away leaves, they get thinner and thinner, like the husks of corn as you get near the cob. At the center, the leaves nearly merge with the stem, a soft column of white pith as thick as your pinky and as crisp as a summer squash. I snap the pith into bite-sized pieces and pass it around. Only after I eat mine do the students venture a nibble, looking at each other sideways. Moments later, they're hungrily stripping stalks for themselves like pandas in a bamboo patch. Sometimes called Cossacks asparagus, the raw pith tastes like cucumber. It can be sautéed, boiled, or simply eaten fresh on the lake shore by hungry college students after their bag lunches are just a memory. Back across the marsh, you can easily see where we've been harvesting. It looks like big muskrats have been at work. The students wade into a heated conversation about their own impact. Our shopping canoes are already filled with leaves for clothing, mats, twine, and shelter. We have buckets of rhizomes for carbohydrate energy, stalks of pith for vegetables. What more could people need? The students compare our haul to their list of human needs. They note that while the cattails are impressive in their versatility, there are some gaps. Protein, fire, light, music. Natalie wants pancakes added to the list. Toilet paper, offers Claudia. Brad has an iPod on his list of essentials. We wander the aisles of the supermarket of the swamp to search out additional products. The students start pretending that they are at an actual Walmart, Lance offering to be the greeter at the door, of wall marsh so he doesn't have to wade back in. Pancakes, ma'am? Aisle 5. Flashlights? Aisle 3. Sorry, Brad, we don't carry iPods. Cattail flowers hardly look like flowers at all. The stalk is about 5 feet tall and ends in a plump green cylinder neatly tucked at the waist into 2 halves, males above and females below. Wind pollinated, the froth of male flowers bursts open to release a cloud of sulfur-yellow pollen into the air. The pancake crew scans the marsh for these beacons. They gently slip a small paper bag over the stalk, crumple it tightly closed, and then shake. At the bottom of the bag, there's about a tablespoon of bright yellow powder and perhaps an equivalent volume of bugs. Pollen and bugs are almost pure protein, a high-quality food to complement the starchy rhizomes back in the canoe. Once the bugs are picked out, it can be added to biscuits and pancakes, adding nutritional value and a beautiful golden color. Not all of the pollen ends up in the bag, and the students emerge decorated with tie-dye splashes of yellow. The female half of the stalk looks like a skinny green hot dog on a stick, a nubbly sponge of tightly packed ovaries waiting for pollen. We'll boil them in a little salt water and then drench them in butter. Holding both ends of the stalk like an ear of corn, you just nibble off the immature flowers as if the stalk were a skewer. The taste and texture are remarkably like an artichoke's. Cattail kebabs for dinner. I hear shouting and see clouds of fluff drifting on the air, so I know that the students have reached Wall Marsh Aisle 3. Each tiny flower matures to a seed attached to a plume of fluff, making up the familiar cattail, a handsome brown sausage at the end of the stalk. At this time of year, wind and winter have picked away at them until they are just wads like cotton batting. The students tear it from the stalk and stuff it into sacks, destined for pillows or bedding. Our foremothers must have been grateful for a thick marsh. One of the names for cattail in the Potawatomi language is Bewiesquiinuk, meaning we wrap the baby in it. Soft, warm, absorbent, it was both insulation and diaper. Elliot calls back to us. I found the flashlights! The stalks with matted fuzz traditionally were dipped in fat and lit to make a serviceable torch. The stalk itself is remarkably straight and smooth, almost like a lathed dowel. Our people gathered these for many uses, including arrow shafts and drills for creating handmade friction fire. A puff of cattail fluff was usually kept in a fire-making bundle as tinder. The students gather it all and bring their bargains back to the canoes. Natalie still wades nearby. She calls out that she's going to Marsh-Alls next. Chris is not back yet. On wings of fluff, the seeds blow far and wide to establish new colonies. Cattails grow in nearly all types of wetlands, wherever there is adequate sun, plentiful nutrients, and soggy ground. Midway between land and water, freshwater marshes are among the most highly productive ecosystems on Earth, rivaling the tropical rainforest. People valued the supermarket of the swamp for the cattails, but also as a rich source of fish and game. Fish spawn in the shallows, frogs and salamanders abound. Waterfowl nest here in the safety of the dense sward, and migratory birds seek out cattail marshes for sanctuary on their journeys. Not surprisingly, hunger for this productive land precipitated a 90% loss of the wetlands, as well as the native people who depended upon them. Cattails are also soil builders. All those leaves and rhizomes return to the sediments when the cattails die back. What hasn't been eaten lies beneath the water, only partially decomposing in the anaerobic waters, building up peat. It is rich in nutrients and has the water-holding capacity of a sponge, making it ideal for truck crops. Decried as wastelands, marsh draining for agriculture was carried out on a huge scale. So-called muck farms plow under the black soil of drained marshes, and a landscape that once supported some of the world's highest biodiversity now supports a single crop. In some places, the old wetlands are just paved over for parking, a true waste of land. Just as we are tying down the load in our canoes, Chris comes walking along the shore with a secret smirk and something behind his back. "Here you go, Brad. I found your iPods." He has 2 dry milkweed pods which he fits over his eyes and holds in place with a squint. iPods. By the end of the mucky, sunburned, laughing, and leech-free day, we have boats piled high with material for rope, bedding, insulation, light, food, heat, shelter, rain gear, shoes, tools, and medicine. As we're paddling home, I wonder if Brad is still worried that we might, quote-unquote, need something. A few days later, fingers roughened by harvesting and weaving mats, we gather in the wigwam with slits of sun coming through our walls of cattail mats, sitting on cattail cushions. The top of the dome is still open to the sky. Surrounded by our woven classroom, it feels like being an apple in a basket, everyone nestled together. The roof is the last step, and rain is in the forecast. We already have a pile of birch bark sheets waiting to become our ceiling, so we head out to gather the last materials. I used to teach just the way I was taught, but now I let someone else do all the work for me. If plants are our oldest teachers, why not let them teach? After the long hike from camp, our shovels clanking against rocks and the relentless torment of deer flies on sweaty skin, the shade feels like a dip into cool water. Still swatting, we drop our packs by the trail to rest for a moment in the mossy hush. The air is redolent with DEET and impatience. Maybe the students already sense the line of welts that the black flies will leave, where that gap of unprotected skin opens between shirt and pants when you're down on all fours, grubbing for roots. They'll lose some blood, but still, I envy them the experience to come, the beginner's mind. The forest floor here is all spruce needles, rusty brown, deep and soft, with the occasional pale drift of maple or black cherry leaves. Ferns, mosses, and trailing partridgeberry glow in the few sunflecks that penetrate the dense canopy. We are here to harvest watap, the roots of white spruce. Piscia glauca, a cultural keystone for indigenous peoples throughout the Great Lakes, strong enough to stitch together birch bark canoes and wigwams, flexible enough for beautiful baskets. The roots of other spruces are serviceable, but it's worth hunting for the glaucous foliage and pungent feline odor of white spruce. We thread our way among the spruces, snapping off dead branches that threaten to poke out an eye as we search for just the right spot. I want them to learn how to read the forest floor, to develop the X-ray vision that helps you see the roots beneath the surface. But it's hard to break down intuition into a formula. Choose a place between 2 spruces to maximize your chances, as level as possible, and avoid a spot with rocks. A well-decayed log nearby is welcome, and a mossy layer is a good sign. In gathering roots, just plunging in will get you nothing but a hole. We have to unlearn hurrying. This is all about slowness. First, we give. Then, we take. Whether it's cattails or birch or roots, the students have gotten used to this pre-harvest ritual, invoking the honorable harvest. Some close their eyes and join me, and some realize it's a good time to fumble through their backpacks for a missing pencil. I murmur to the spruces who I am and why I have come. Using bits of Potawatomi and bits of English, I ask their kind permission for digging. I ask if they will share with these dear young people what only they can give, their physical bodies and their teachings. I am asking for something more than roots and leave a little tobacco in return. This has been Chapter 20 of Braiding Sweetgrass, Sitting in a Circle, Part 1, written by Robin Wall Kimmerer, read by Naomi Kirst-Schultz.